The nervous system, functions of the cerebral cortex. The cerebrum is the seat of many of the higher mental functions, such as memory and learning, language, and conscious perception, which are the subjects of subtests of the mental status exam. The cerebral cortex is the thin layer of gray matter on the outside of the cerebrum. It is approximately a millimeter thick in most regions and highly folded to fit within the limited space of the cranial vault. These higher functions are distributed across various regions of the cortex, and specific locations can be said to be responsible for particular functions. There is a limited set of regions, for example, that are involved in language function, and they can be subdivided on the basis of the particular function of language function that each governs. Cognitive abilities. Assessment of cerebral functions is directed at cognitive abilities. The abilities assessed through the mental status exam can be separated into 4 groups: orientation and memory, language and speech, sensorium, and judgment and abstract reasoning. Orientation and memory. Orientation is the patient's awareness of his or her immediate circumstances. It is awareness of time, not in terms of the clock, but of the date and what is occurring around the patient. It is awareness of place, such that a patient should know where he or she is and why. It is also awareness of who the patient is, recognizing personal identity and being able to relate that to the examiner. The initial tests of orientation are based on the questions: do you know what the date is? Or do you know where you are? Or what is your name? Further understanding of a patient's awareness of orientation can come from questions that address remote memory, such as, who is the President of the United States? Or asking what happened on a specific date. Memory is largely a function of the temporal lobe, along with structures beneath the cerebral cortex, such as the hippocampus and the amygdala. The storage of memory requires the structures of the medial temporal lobe. A famous case of a man who had both medial temporal lobes removed to treat intractable epilepsy provided insight into the relationship between the structures of the brain and the function of memory. The prefrontal cortex can also be tested for the ability to organize information. In one subtest of the mental status exam set called set generation, the patient is asked to generate a list of words that all start with the same letter, but not to include proper names or nouns. The expectation is that a person can generate such a list of at least 10 words within 1 minute. Many people can likely do this much more quickly, but the standard separates the accepted normal from those with compromised prefrontal cortices. Language and speech. Language is arguably a very human aspect of neurological function. There are certainly strides being made in understanding communication in other species, but much of what makes the human experience seemingly unique is its basis in language. Any understanding of our species is necessarily reflective, as suggested by the question, what am I? And the fundamental answer to this question is suggested by the famous quote by René Descartes, Cogito ergo sum, translated from Latin as I think, therefore I am. Formulating an understanding of yourself is largely describing who you are to yourself. It is a confusing topic to delve into, but language is certainly at the core of what it means to be self-aware. The neurological exam has 2 specific subtests that address language. One measures the ability of the patient to understand language by asking them to follow a set of instructions to perform an action, such as touch your right finger to your left elbow and then to your right knee. Another test assesses the fluency and coherency of language by having the patient generate descriptions of objects or scenes depicted in drawings, and by reciting sentences or explaining a written passage. An important example of multimodal integrative areas is associated with language function. Adjacent to the auditory association cortex at the end of the lateral sulcus, just anterior to the visual cortex, is Wernicke's area. In the lateral aspect of the frontal lobe, just anterior to the region of the motor cortex associated with the head and neck, is Broca's area. Both regions were originally described on the basis of losses of speech and language, which is called aphasia. The aphasia associated with Broca's area is known as expressive aphasia, which means that speech production is compromised. This type of aphasia is often described as non-fluency because the ability to say some words leads to broken or halting speech. Grammar can also appear to be lost. The aphasia associated with Wernicke's area is known as a receptive aphasia, which is not a loss of speech production, but a loss of understanding of content. Patients, after recovering from acute forms of aphasia, report not being able to understand what is said to them or what they are saying themselves, but they often cannot keep from talking. The two regions are connected by white matter tracts that run between the posterior temporal lobe and the lateral aspect of the frontal lobe. Conduction aphasia, associated with damage to this connection, refers to the problem of connecting the understanding of language to the production of speech. This is a very rare condition, but is likely to present as an inability to faithfully repeat spoken language. Sensorium. Those parts of the brain involved in the reception and interpretation of sensory stimuli are referred to collectively as sensorium. The cerebral cortex has several regions that are necessary for sensory perception. Several of the tests can reveal activity associated with these sensory modalities, such as being able to hear a question or see a picture. Two tests assess specific functions of these cortical areas. The first is praxis, a practical exercise in which the patient performs a task completely on the basis of verbal description without any demonstration from the examiner. The second test for sensory perception is gnosis, which involves two tasks. The first task, known as stereognosis, involves the naming of objects strictly on the basis of the somatosensory information that comes from manipulating them. The patient keeps their eyes closed and is given a common object, such as a coin, that they have to identify. The patient should be able to indicate the particular type of coin, such as a dime versus a penny, or a nickel versus a quarter, on the basis of the sensory cues involved. For example, the size, thickness, or weight of the coin may be an indication, or to differentiate the pairs of coins suggested here. The smooth or corrugated edge of the coin will correspond to the particular denomination. The second task, or graphesthesia, is to recognize numbers or letters written on the palm of the hand with a dull pointer, such as a pen cap. The patient keeps their eyes closed and is given a common object, such as a coin, and they have to identify. The patient should be able to indicate the particular type of coin, such as a dime versus a penny or a nickel versus a quarter, on the basis of the sensory cues involved.